All right. Ha! I always love starting off any video I do with all right. I don't know. I just love that word, all right. It just means that everything is okay. It's all right. It's all good in the hood. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Good morning, everybody. Well, I'm recording this in the morning. Who knows when you're going to watch it? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on the time you're viewing this. Welcome to another episode of Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli, the Daily Walk Edition. I am your host, Coach Eli. This is episode number 14, and I'm back at Red Morton Park. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty good today. Feeling pretty good today. Um, I've been mentioning in some past videos that, every morning, since the changes I've been going through in my life over the past 3 months, I kind of wake up with a large level of anxiety, especially now that I've been a little under the weather. It kind of enhances that a bit. Um, and I did mention that in a previous video that, your sickness, if you get sick when you're going through something traumatic, it can enhance it and make it feel worse than it actually is. So I think that's kind of been affecting me a little bit. But you know what? I'm the kind of person that just fights through things, especially when I know that I have a mission, a purpose, a passion, and a plan to really make something happen. Um, you know, for myself, but also for other people as well, which is what I'm doing here. By bringing back my coaching business. And yeah, had an interesting night last night. Um, hung out with a friend of mine and we had a good time. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Let's not get too far into it. I've had some interesting days over the past 3 months, especially the last month or so. But anyway, it is a brisk, chilly morning here at the park today. And those of you that have been paying attention to the news, this has been a national story. We've had a major wildfire here in the not in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the Northern California area, up north in Butte County, which is near, Chico, Redding, that area. And the air quality has been shitty all over Northern California because when you have such a large wildfire, the wind pushes it down, even as far as where I live in Redwood City, California. And it's still kind of smoky up top. Let's see. But it's not as bad. It actually feels a lot better. It actually looks, feels, and smells less smoky. And I tell you, that definitely, you know, does help. It does help when you're taking these walks. Breathing in fresh air is incredible. When you breathe in air that's contaminated, it just kind of fucks with your body, and it's not good. So it's getting better. The fire, I believe, is getting closer to being, uh, I think, 30 or 40% contained or something like that. So that is good. It is very, very good. But today, I have a very interesting topic um, that I'm going to be discussing that I've had some personal experience in dealing with. And it was a topic that was being discussed by a couple of my Facebook friends that commented on one of my videos. A good friend of mine, Rachel, who goes by Rachel Bug on Facebook, and my other good friend, Linda Sue Arrowwood, who I've known for many, many years. I met her through running and attending networking events all over Northern California. She's an entrepreneur that lives in Northern California, a great lady. They were kind of talking back and forth, and Rachel was mentioning that our youth nowadays fears commitment. And it's kind of sad that our youth is fearing commitment, and they're not giving relationships a fair chance, just like we have in previous generations. And that's what I'm going to be discussing here today, because I have some personal experience that I've dealt with, that, even though I don't have kids. So let me get to the topic here, and I'll explain more in just a second. Okay, the topic of today's Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli, episode number 14, Daily Walk Edition, is how our youth is suffering from commitment phobia, why this is happening, and how to correct it. One more time, how our youth is suffering from commitment phobia in today's modern world, why this is happening, and how to correct it. Now, again, I do not have any kids. I've never had any kids, but I've actually dated women before that have had children, including my now recent ex that, recently broke it off with me several months ago. And before I get into this, I want to put out my disclaimer. I'm not going to be mentioning any names. I'm not going to mention my ex's names or her kids' names. This is just for example purposes, and this is not to throw anybody under the bus. This is not to say that, someone's parental style is not good or anything like that. This is just about stating the facts. And it's also going to be based on what I've learned, by following one person in particular, who is a licensed psychologist slash psychotherapist online. His name is Coach Craig Kenneth, who discusses attachment styles, who discusses attachment trauma, who discusses, that in your early childhood, between the time you're born at age 0 through age 3, that's when you learn your attachment style based on how your primary caregivers are raising you. An example, your mother, your father, or whoever your legal guardian is, maybe you're adopted, you're gonna learn your attachment style. So again, I want to make it very clear that, I'm not going to mention any names, and my experience in this comes hands-on, from being in a year and a half relationship with my ex, who has two amazing teenage daughters that are awesome, in my opinion. I have nothing bad to say about them. It was a great experience. But you know what? While being with my ex, who I was able to attach to, she was able to attach to me. We had no problem attaching to each other because, we come from the old school, and her and I were raised with more traditional values. And her and I were raised, for the most part, from good families that were there for us, and, you know, taught us, what nurturing love is really all about. Okay. So let's get right into it and talk about why I feel, based on my personal experiences, that our youth is having a hard time attaching, you know, to others in today's modern world. For example, when I was a teenager, I had a high school sweetheart. I fell in love with her. She fell in love with me. We dated. We went to a bunch of proms together because we went to two different schools. I went to, you know, her junior and senior prom, and she went to my junior and senior prom. And it was just amazing. It was like a normal, healthy relationship. It was my first relationship and her first relationship, but we had no problem, attaching and committing to each other. And this was back in the early 90s. Okay. So we're going to go back, let's say, to 1991, 1992, around that time. Okay, so we're looking at 92, 02, 12. Shit, it's been almost what, 30 years? Holy shit. It's been a while, like what, 27 years or so? And let me tell you, the world has changed since that time. In the early 90s, like I mentioned in many other videos, is when the third wave of the women's movement really started to kick in. The second wave back in the 60s through the 80s is, when women were fighting for rights and got rights. And in the 90s, it's just kind of like really gotten out of hand because now we have the media that's getting involved and, is portraying things the way they feel things should be between men and women. And it's really fucked shit up. I believe I talked a bunch about that in my video yesterday. So check out yesterday's video, episode number 13, to learn more detail about my thoughts regarding that and how I feel the media has fucked shit up. Excuse me. Still a little under the weather here, so pardon me. I'm kind of struggling to talk a little bit because my voice is a little hoarse today, but got to keep moving forward. Okay, so yeah, my high school sweetheart and I had a great relationship. No problem committing. We were raised that way. But let's fast forward now to the teenagers of today's day and age. Okay, in the 2000s or so, we had the millennial generation, and um, now we have what's called the post-millennial generation. We have the I generation. They call it the I generation because these kids were practically born and raised with a smartphone in their hand. iPhone, Android. But I notice more of our youth that I've seen have iPhones. They love the iPhone. Nothing wrong with Android, but I have an iPhone as well. Even though I'm more of a PC guy, you know, the iPhone is the only Apple product I use because I do think the iPhone is the best phone out there. But it is also the most expensive phone out there as well. So if we fast forward to today's day and age, and for example purposes, when I was dating my ex, and I'll tell you, while I was dating her, even up until, the very last week of our relationship, things were incredible. I'm not saying things were perfect, but we always got along. I got along with her kids. I got along with her family. The reason why we split up, I was going through some things myself. And, I've kind of shared that story in other videos. And I'll be sharing more of that story in an interview I'm going to be doing with Charles F. Gray this coming Friday, like I mentioned in the past several videos. So, again, I don't want to kind of repeat things here. I don't want to repeat things. So, check out the past few videos and you'll kind of find out what's really going on and what's coming up with me soon. Okay? But my relationship with my ex was pretty good. And I really enjoyed spending time with her and her kids. But what was more fascinating for me was seeing how their kids were growing up and their behavior, you know, towards hanging out with other people. So she has two teenage daughters. Her oldest daughter now is 17, her youngest one is 14. And her oldest daughter, started driving, and she loves to drive. She's a great driver. Even though the very first time that she got her permit and my ex and I went out with her, my ex took her on one of the craziest, windiest roads in the North Bay area, and she took a turn too fast and almost, hit another car head on, but missed the car. So fortunately, we lived. I'll never forget that. I have a great memory. But her oldest daughter is really outgoing. She's, a nice, down to earth, sweet young lady. Both her girls are attractive girls. They take good care of themselves. Their mother raised them right. And when I say their mother raised them right, I'm saying their mother solely raised them right and has been raising them right because the father really hasn't been in the picture that much. And that's where I believe the problem stems from right there. What's going to affect, you know, a, a teenage boy or teenage girl to have attachment issues when they're going through high school and they start noticing the opposite sex and they're looking to explore and experience dating and other things like that of that nature, right? What's going to affect their attachment style on how they, connect with the opposite sex? It's how they were raised. It's their, first, 3 years of their life and the way both their mother and father are raising them. Well, when I first met my ex, she shared the story with me about how things were with her ex-husband when they first, when her girls were first born. And she had told me, her ex-husband was a grocery clerk. He had been working for a, you know, a local supermarket for many years, worked his way up, was making decent money. And, things were okay at that point. And then what ended up happening was, he ended up getting laid off his job, lost his shit, and lost his identity, and just basically couldn't find a job after that, which ended up leading to their divorce. But how did that affect, their two daughters? Even when he was working and the girls were born, my ex told me that their father was never really present. He didn't know how to connect with them. He didn't know how to engage them. He didn't know how to make them laugh, how to show them a good time, how to entertain them, etc. So I think I'm going to come around this way because there are a lot of people over here. I'm going to kind of cruise through these trees over here. I haven't been through this area over here in a while. Okay, so to move further along here, basically the father, who was a nice guy, my ex told me that he was a nice guy, and I believe that he was and still is a nice guy, but just, you know, didn't know how to connect and relate to the girls, so he would avoid them. Not completely avoid them, but not totally be there for them in ways that a normal father would be there for their kids. Okay? And from what I've learned, I mean, both parents are important when it comes to raising your kids, especially during the first 3 years of their life. But if you look at it deeper, okay, a little boy is going to more so look at his relationship with his mother and how she is, and that's going to affect how that little boy attaches to other women in his life when he gets older. So his relationship with his mother is going to set the example for the type of woman that he's going to be attracted to and feel comfortable and safe with. On the flip side, a little girl is going to look up to her father and is basically going to, look up to him to be the role model, the example of the type of man that she's going to be attracted to and she's going to feel comfortable and safe being around with. Okay. And if you've ever heard, of these stories where, you know, what happens when a little girl, is growing up and she's crying, she's not feeling good about something. She wants to go and sit on daddy's lap and daddy's supposed to make her feel all safe and warm and comfortable again, right? We've all heard that, right? Okay. In this situation, okay, my ex-girlfriend's ex-husband at the time when they were married wasn't able to do that. Didn't know how to do that. So she's telling me this story, right? My ex is telling me this story early on when we first started dating about a year and a half ago. And I was curious because I was just really getting into this coaching thing, and I had learned a lot. I'd done a lot of personal development, and I was really wondering where the root of the problem was. So I asked her some questions. She was open to answering them, and she basically told me that what ended up happening was in his youth, okay, his father abandoned him and his mother and the rest of their family at a very early age and left them all for another woman, got married, got her pregnant, had another family with a different woman. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, aha, there we go. There we go. There is the issue with the ex husband. It's an issue that I can't blame him for because his father abandoned him. So my ex girlfriend's ex husband at the time when they were married was going through abandonment issues where his father abandoned him and his mother and the rest of their family at a young age, and he didn't learn how to be a strong man. He he learned that he learned being abandoned. That's what he learned. So it left him lost and confused, which explains, his behavior in the relationship. He was a really, really nice and decent guy, my ex said, but he just didn't know how to be a man. He didn't know how to be a human being beyond being a man. He was abandoned by his father at a young age. So now you can understand why my ex-girlfriend's ex-husband, when they were married at the time, had a hard time connecting and relating to their two daughters. Okay? Now, how does that affect the daughters? The daughters are seeing this. They're trying to get nurturing love from their father. Their father's avoiding them. Now the girls are feeling abandoned. Now the daughters are feeling like their father doesn't really give a shit about them. And they don't know how to react because, mommy's still married to daddy, and mommy is apparently seems happy with daddy on the outside, but on the inside, mommy's like, what the fuck is wrong with daddy? Right? And the two young girls who are now teenagers at the time when they were really young are wondering what the fuck is going on. They're getting confused. Now, how has this affected them as they've gotten older? Okay, this is just my opinion. This is not criticizing the parental style of my ex because I think my ex has done a great job of, keeping her girls on track and giving them a fair shot at life after everything that their father hasn't done for them, which in essence we really can't blame, her ex-husband because he was abandoned by his father. He didn't know any better. He was being all that he knew how to be based on how he was raised and abandoned by his father. And then he ended up being raised by his mother and basically learned more feminine qualities than masculine qualities. So in essence, he learned how to more so be a feminized man than a masculine man. And that has affected him and will affect him for the rest of his life unless he, reaches out to Coach Eli or somehow figures it out. Because as far as I know to this day, he's still stuck in that same rut trying to figure this shit out, why he went through divorce. And I understand why he went through divorce. And when I talked about it with my ex back in those days, she further understood, why it ended up in divorce because of all the things I've been talking about right now. Okay? So, how has it affected, her teenage daughters? Okay? Her teenage daughters, I'm just going to speak on the older one because the younger one, she's still really young. I'm just going to use the older one as an example. The older one, is very outgoing, young, attractive, smart, outgoing, decent lady with a great personality. a lot of guys are interested in dating her. And she's, dated a few guys. But the funny thing was, when my ex-girlfriend and I would hang out with her oldest daughter, and we would all go to dinner sometimes, and I would take him to dinner. We were kind of like a family at that point. That's what I really loved about my last relationship. I kind of felt like I had a family. um, I would ask her, I'm like, so how's it going with, the guy you're dating? It's like, are things getting serious? Oh no, we're just friends. We just hang out, this and that. Like, there's no romance or anything like that. Oh no, we're just friends. Nobody dates nowadays, and nobody gets serious. We're just all good friends. We hang out in a group. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that's not how it was when I was growing up. It's not how it was when I was growing up. I'm like, I had a high school sweetheart. We loved each other. We went to each other's proms together. It was all good. So, every so often when I would, you know, run across, my ex-girlfriend's, daughter as she would come in and out of the house when my ex-girlfriend and I were hanging out there, I would ask her, how's it going with blah, 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 this and that. And it would just make her feel weird. It would make her feel like uncomfortable. It would make her like say, "Oh, we're just friends. It's whatever, right?" And I'm looking back now with what I've learned since that point, especially since my breakup, and doing more research on this, that basically her oldest daughter has fears of commitment because of her relationship with her father. Because basically her father, you know, I wouldn't say has fully abandoned her, but it has just not been present with her, has not been able to talk with her about these things and be there for her in the ways that a typical father would be there for her daughter. You know, her father is a lost soul. So what my ex-girlfriend's oldest daughter is pretty much doing is somewhat replicating her father's behavior of not knowing what to do, or fearing commitment, or not knowing how to connect with people because of the fact that he was abandoned by his father. I have a feeling that, you know, my ex-girlfriend's oldest daughter fears being hurt by a man or being abandoned by a man because of what she's seen through her father. Okay? Now, she can probably work through that, and my ex, who was raised by two amazing parents that are still married today. I really loved and still love my ex's parents. They're great people. She has the more stable side, and she's been trying to teach her oldest daughter and her youngest daughter as well the proper way to connect and associate with other people and attach to other people. And she's doing the best she can, but you know, in all honesty, that relationship, the girl's relationship with her father is still going to traumatize them. And it's going to traumatize them for a long time. And it's going to be very difficult to penetrate. And that's what's happened. No disrespect. Look, my ex, wonderful woman. Her kids, great kids. The ex-husband, which is the daughter's, father, not a bad guy, nice guy, but just doesn't get it. Just has never learned how to be a man. Has never, you know, has never been able to step up to the plate and be that rock, not only for my ex, but for their kids as well. And it's not because he doesn't want to be that rock and do the right thing. He just doesn't know what the right thing is because he never learned it because his father abandoned him at a young age. And I think that's why you're going to see a lot of problems with our youth having commitment issues, because relationships in the modern world, like I've been discussing, have been failing because of these situations like I'm mentioning here. That's what's happening. Is that the modern world has really changed things so much to where, people are are just they just don't know how to handle it. And this stems back to my ex's ex-husband's father, who was already dealing with this shit, which probably stems back, what, 40, 50 years ago? It was already starting back then. It was already starting during the second wave of the women's movement. It was already starting back then. And look how this has affected their life in the present world. And look how it's going to affect the future. Unless this behavior is corrected, which my ex is trying to do the absolute best that she can do to give her daughters the best shot at life, it's going to affect her girls from feeling like they can trust to be with a man and not experiencing the same things that, their mother experienced going through divorce, or experiencing the same things that their father experienced, like he did with his father abandoning him. They see all that. They fear all that. So they shut down. And they want to connect and they want to feel close to somebody, but but they only get close enough to the point of where they know they can easily withdraw and not feel the pain of any loss. And that's what I think is happening with her oldest one. Her oldest one is an awesome, awesome girl who deserves to have the best, who deserves down the road to meet a great guy and to fall in love and to have the fairy tale and have a life together. But unless that behavior is corrected, that she's learned from her father, it's going to affect her life. And I think her mother realized it, and she's doing the best she can. I have nothing bad to say about my ex's parental style. Based on what she's had to deal with, the lack of having a real strong man in her life to help raise their kids, she's done an amazing job. And I can sit there and say that to this day, even though she split up with me 3 months ago and we're no longer together. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to talk shit about somebody just because they broke it off with me. I'm going to be real and honest because I want to share the facts here. Okay? So that's the reason why I feel, our youth is having the difficulty attaching, because relationship dynamics from the previous generations has changed. In addition, they have these iPhones and Android, phones in their hands. They're attached to their hips, and they watch all these YouTube videos and they see all these things, in the mainstream media and through alternative media that basically are saying, "Hey, you don't need a man for anything, ladies. Ladies, you could do it on your own. Girl power, this and that." They're seeing all this shit, and it's further confusing the shit out of them. Now, I try to do my best when I was with my ex and her kids to share with them my experiences and to help them out. But number one, I'm not their father. Number two, you know, there's that dog again. I passed by that place. Number two, I didn't want to make it appear like I was going against their mother's parental style. And there were a couple times where my ex did question me about questioning her parental style. And I said, no, I'm not questioning your parental style. I'm just saying, look, your kids haven't had a father figure in their life. I said, look, I'm with you And I accept the fact that you have two kids, because if I didn't accept the fact that you have two kids and wanted to spend time with them and get to know them and be somewhat of a father figure to them, then why are you with me? So she kind of understood that, but still, you know, still she really didn't want me getting involved in any of the, you know, parental process. Guys, when you're dating somebody that has young children or teenage kids and the father really isn't in the picture, you have to understand that you're gonna have somewhat of a father figure role. And I had no problem with that. I wanted to have that. I've always wanted to have kids, and since I don't have kids, this was the closest thing to it. And my intentions were totally pure. I really wanted her girls, and I still want her girls to have the best shot at life. Okay? But some women, they feel like, if you're a man that's dating them, and you're not the biological father, you really don't have anything. There's really not much you can say, or they really don't want to hear it sometimes. Maybe up to a certain point. I really wanted to make a difference. I really wanted to help because I really feel I have an understanding as to what these girls have gone through based on, the lack of parenting they've received from their father, the lack of nurturing love they received from their father, which is very crucial to young girls growing up, and especially even through their teenage years. They don't have the support of their dad as a role model for the type of man that they would want to see. So if they're seeing, you know, their dad withdrawing, if they're seeing their dad not being present, they're going to assume that all men are like that. So they're going to have a hard time attaching to men because they're going to fear that any man they attach to is going to abandon them. That's the problem right there. Okay? So, what is the solution before I wrap up this video here? Okay, if you're in a situation like my ex, or it could be on the flip side, maybe, you're in a situation where you're the father and you have full custody of your kids and the mother abandoned the kids. The same thing is going to happen on the flip side. Okay? If you're in a situation where, you know, one side, either the mother or the father, has left and checked out completely, the other side that has full custody or has the kids the majority of the time, it's going to be up to them to try to explain to them that, hey, look, this is what happened. I want to be honest with you. Okay, this is what happened between your father and I. You got to be honest with the kids and let them know directly. And this is how I feel it is affecting you. I don't want you to think that every man, in the case of my ex-girlfriend and her kids, I don't want you to think that every man that you meet out there is going to be like your father just because your father is this way. Your father's not a bad guy. He just doesn't know how to be. He just doesn't understand life. But you know what? I'm here for you, and we need to stick together. I'm here for you, and we need to stick together. And I can help you navigate through this to give you the best shot at life so you can have that great relationship with a good man and not fear giving them a chance. And in the case of my ex, you're going to need to emphasize that. In the case of, you know, um, anybody who has full custody of their kids where the other side, where the other parent has checked out completely, you're going to have to communicate with their kids and play the role of both the mother and the father. And be very clear with them and say, I understand how this is affecting you from being able to trust people, but don't deny people a chance to get to know them and be with them and connect with them emotionally because of what happened with, you know, with your father or mother, depending on, which side is not around anymore. So you just have to clearly communicate it with your kids. You have to explain to them. You can't be afraid to tell them the truth because, in all honesty, they know the truth. They've seen what's happened. And the more you try to hide it from them, the more you're going to set them back. That's just my opinion from what I've seen. I do not have any kids, but again, I've dated women with kids, and especially my last girlfriend, which was an amazing experience because I really got to learn and understand, how it is to raise two teenage daughters, especially on your own as a woman when the father really isn't present. Okay? The divorce rate is higher than ever before. The divorce rate's higher than it's ever been before. Okay? And that all stems back to what I've said before, modern day feminism. People are breaking up a lot easier nowadays because women have been liberated and they can support themselves. They have their own jobs, their own homes, their own cars. So what happens nowadays is relationships break up a lot easier. And if you're in a relationship where you have kids or a marriage where you have kids, that broken relationship is going to affect them from being able to attach and feel comfortable giving someone a chance to attach to them emotionally and fall in love with them. Okay, it's going to affect them because they're going to fear the same thing's going to happen to them. So you got to talk to them about this, and you got to say, hey, look, don't let my relationship with your father or my relationship with your mother, if it's on the flip side, affect you from going out there and connecting with somebody, you know, that makes you feel good and you can make them feel good as well. You got to be very clear and upfront about it. The difficult thing is, as a parent, when you're going through all that, you may be in such a terrible negative emotional state about your relationship status that it may be affecting you from wanting to share that with your kids, but you got to be strong. You got to be the rock. You cannot, if you're a parent, a single parent taking care of kids, you cannot let any part of your life affect how you come off to your kids because it's going to affect them greatly if you do that. You got to be strong. Even if you're a woman, you got to be strong or it's going to affect your kids. Okay? And so, yeah, does it suck? Does it suck that that's the way things are nowadays? Do you folks now see over the last 50 years or so that, modern day feminism and the women's movement and how things have shifted, uh, have affected all aspects of life? It used to never be this way. I'm saying this again without taking anything away from women and women having equal rights. Women should have equal rights. But do you see how the fact that, you know, women are more empowered nowadays, and especially the women that take it a bit too far, affects all aspects of life? I'm only mentioning this because, again, this shit really didn't happen over 50 years ago. All the issues we're discussing today stem from one thing, stem from, women's lib. They stem from women's lib because it changed relationship dynamics between a man and a woman, which is going to affect your kids. It's going to affect everything. Okay? And that's as far as I'm going to take this today here. I think I've kind of drilled this into the ground here. There really isn't much more to say about it. But anyway, I'm about to make a phone call with my good friend Rachel that I met from YouTube um, about 8 or 9 months ago. We're gonna talk about some things, and she may come on some live streams with me and collaborate on some things with me. So I'm gonna talk with her. But before I run off to that, I want to mention this: that look, if you have kids out there, If you have kids out there, be honest with them. Don't hold back. Tell them exactly what's happened in your life. Okay? Let them know exactly how you feel about things nowadays. Let them know how much more difficult it is to navigate this modern world. Let them know that they should go out there and give the world a fair chance. A lot of these kids nowadays are on their smartphones and they communicate through Snapchat, they communicate through all these messenger apps over actually hanging out in person. Encourage your kids to go out there and meet in person. Now, granted, we all have our smartphones, we all use them wherever we go. I'm guilty of that as well. That's just the way the world is nowadays. But in all honesty, use that smartphone to set a date, or tell your kids use that smartphone to set up times to meet with their friends, or if they're dating somebody, to meet their boyfriend or girlfriend, and to go out and hang out in person and experience life. It's another thing that's going to make a big difference. It's another thing that's affecting the modern world is that it's all digital now. Nobody wants to hang out anymore. They just sit there and create these large online groups, or on Snapchat they have these things called Snap Streaks, and they make it a point to send a message with somebody every day just to keep their streak going. But in all honesty, is that the healthiest way to go out there and associate with others and to, you know, socialize with people, you know? Is it? In my opinion, it's not. It's okay to a certain point. It's a great way to keep in touch with people when you're busy and can't see them, but you should also be doing whatever you can to make plans and hang out with your friends. Hang out, if you're a teenager and you're dating somebody, hang out with your girlfriend, boyfriend as much as possible in person. And that'll make a big difference there. But you, as parents, have to encourage that. You and parents have to sit there and put your foot down sometimes and say, hey, look, you know what? You've been on this phone all day. You've been stuck in the house all day, all week. Why don't you get out there and do something? Or why don't you, come with me and let's go do something? Like, one more thing. When I was with my ex, her youngest one would like to stay in a lot and just watch YouTube videos and and read stuff. She's a very intelligent kid, very smart student. And you know what I would do when I was there? I would tell her to encourage her daughter to come out with us. I'll take them both out to lunch or dinner. We'll go watch a movie. We'll go take a hike together. I encourage those things. And let me tell you, initially in our relationship, it worked and it was great. And then when things went sour between my ex and I, obviously that's going to change. But the point of the matter is that, you know, I've always been the kind of person to encourage, you know, going out there and just making things happen and not just sitting on your ass doing nothing. I'm not saying that her younger daughter would sit on her ass doing nothing, but she was more of a homebody that just liked to hang out on the computer and learn things and study things and just spend time with herself. That's okay to a certain point, but if you do that all the time, it's going to affect your social skills. So what I always encouraged was saying, hey, why don't you have your little girl come out with us and we'll go do something. And her little girl would say no, and I'd say, hey, come on, I'll take you out to lunch on me. I got you. I got your back, you know. And her mother would also encourage her, and then she would come. See how simple it is? It's as simple as you want it to be. Just remember this: anything in life can be accomplished and is as simple as you make it to be. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up. Hopefully, this video wasn't all over the place. All right, I got to run off to my phone call with Rachel here. I'll let you know more about what happens regarding that probably later today in another video if I do one, or by tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you all soon.